The night it all fell apart. The one moment I'd never imagined, played out as if it were written in some cruel script. My father, the man who had taught me everything I knew about business, about hard work, about family, suddenly wasn't the man I thought I knew. I sat across from him in his office, the same office where we'd brainstormed ideas, celebrated victories, and shared countless hours of hard labor. But tonight, it felt like a foreign place, as if the walls had closed in on me. I had built our company from the ground up, alongside my father. The long nights, the sacrifices, the relentless grind. It had all paid off. We were a success, $1 million success. And yet there I was, staring at the man who had given me everything, and hearing words that shattered everything I'd worked for. "You're out," he said. "I'm giving the business to your brother." It felt like a punch to the gut, but it was more than that. It was betrayal. "My name is Elias, and I've spent the better part of my life trying to make my father proud. From the day I learned how to balance a ledger to the countless business deals I'd closed, everything had been in the pursuit of proving my worth to him. And yet, in the blink of an eye, it all crumbled. I thought I understood our family dynamic, our business partnership, but nothing could prepare me for the moment he chose my younger brother, Sean, someone who had never cared about the company, about the legacy, about the family. Why? That question has haunted me ever since. How could a man who I'd worked beside for so many years, a man who had instilled in me every lesson I knew, make this choice? I wasn't just losing my place in the company. I was losing the very relationship I had spent my life building. And this is where my story begins. A tale of ambition, family, betrayal, and the bitter journey of rebuilding everything from the ground up, without the one person I thought would always have my back. The office door slammed shut behind me, with an echo that reverberated through my chest, every fiber of my being vibrating with the shock of what had just happened. My father's words, still ringing in my ears, felt like a cold gust of wind blowing through everything I had known. "I'm giving the business to your brother." It was like a betrayal wrapped in a business decision, but it cut deeper than any deal or contract ever could. In that moment, I couldn't even breathe. For as long as I could remember, the company had been the centerpiece of our lives. My father, Samir Khan, had started it with nothing but a dream and a fierce will to succeed. He had shown me the ropes early, teaching me about risk and reward, about the grind and the hustle. I had lived and breathed this business since I was a kid. Every summer vacation spent in the office, every early morning, every late night, all of it had been in preparation for the moment when my father would hand over the keys to the empire, or at least, that was the plan. Or so I thought. But now, as I stood there, in my father's office, my future slipping away from me, the one thing I couldn't wrap my mind around was why. Why my brother? Sean was different. He was the younger one, the one who always seemed to float through life without a care in the world, while I was the one working late into the night, negotiating contracts, handling finances. Sean was out with his friends, living a carefree life. Sure, he was charming and people liked him. But a businessman? Not even close. He didn't have the fire, the grit, the vision that I had spent my entire life cultivating. The tension between us hadn't been new, not by any means. My relationship with Sean had always been complicated, to say the least. Growing up, he was the golden child, the one who never really had to try. My father would praise him for his charisma, his charm, the way he could walk into a room and instantly win people over. But Sean was always more interested in the perks of the business, the cars, the parties, the attention, than the work itself. He'd never cared about the strategy or the grind. He had no interest in the challenges I faced, on a daily basis. To him, it was all just a game. But what hurt the most was that I could see how easy it had been for my father to make this decision. The bond I'd worked so hard to build with him, the years of sweat and sacrifice, suddenly meant nothing. In the end, it felt like nothing but a business transaction to him. And worse, it felt like Sean had been handed something he hadn't earned. There was a shift in the air between my father and me. I had always been the responsible one, the one who knew the numbers inside out, the one who could handle the pressure of keeping the business running smoothly. But Sean, he was the dreamer, the one who didn't take anything seriously. Yet now, my father was entrusting him with everything we had worked for. "Dad," I said, my voice tight with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Why him? Why not me? I've been here every day. I've done everything for this company." He looked at me with a coldness that I had never seen before. His face, usually warm with the kindness that I had known all my life, was now stone. "Elias, I've made my decision. Your brother is the future. You don't understand the bigger picture. It's time for you to move on." His words hit me like a physical blow. He spoke as if the work we'd done together was nothing more than a chapter in a book, one that could be closed and forgotten. But for me, it was more than that. It was everything. And now, it felt as though I had no place in this story anymore. Was not just losing the company, I was losing my place in the family. The man who had raised me, who had been my mentor and my guide, was now casting me aside for someone I had spent my entire life trying to understand. And to make matters worse, Sean didn't even seem to fully grasp the weight of what he was inheriting. He didn't know the sacrifices, the risks, the years of sleepless nights and unspoken struggles that had built this business from the ground up. After my father kicked me out of the office, I wandered aimlessly through the building, feeling the walls close in around me. The buzz of the fluorescent lights above seemed louder, more intrusive than usual. I passed by my old desk, the one I had spent countless hours at, signing deals, making calls, and steering the ship through choppy waters. The desk was still there, but the place felt foreign now, like a distant memory that no longer belonged to me. It wasn't just the business I was losing. It was the trust. It was the relationship with my father, the one I had worked my entire life to build. And the worst part? I didn't even know why. There were no reasons, no explanations, just the cold finality of his decision. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I got was the silence of the empty office and the heavy weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. Back home, things weren't much better. Sean acted like nothing had changed, like it was just another day, another step in his journey. He couldn't understand why I was so upset. To him, it was just another opportunity, a chance for him to show everyone that he could handle it, that he could do it his way. He was excited, eager to jump into the role. But I could see it in his eyes. He had no clue what was coming. And that was the hardest part of all. Watching him step into a role that he had no understanding of, no appreciation for. It was a slap in the face. He didn't know the stakes, the history, or the sacrifices. All he knew was that Dad had handed him the keys, and now it was his turn to play. Meanwhile, I was left to rebuild my life, rebuild my career, and, most painfully, rebuild my relationship with the man I had once idolized. I knew I had to find a way forward, but I didn't know where to begin. All I had was a broken dream, a shattered trust, and a company that I had helped build, but no longer had a place in. The days following my departure from the company felt like a slow, relentless descent into something I couldn't control. I couldn't tell anyone what had happened. Not at first. The humiliation of being cast aside by my own father, the disbelief of it all, kept me silent. I couldn't even look at my phone without seeing a flood of congratulatory messages directed toward Sean, a stream of well-wishers praising his new role in the company. To them, it was a natural progression. To me, it felt like the world had turned upside down, and I was left standing in the rubble of a life I had built for myself. But I wasn't ready to let go. I couldn't accept that this was the end of my journey. I'd spent years building something with my father, shaping it into a thriving business, and there had to be something more than just walking away. So I made a choice. I would fight. But the question was, how? At first, I tried to stay out of the company's affairs. I thought maybe I could find another path, try to build something from scratch. But every time I thought about it, every time I imagined taking on a new challenge, the weight of my father's decision pressed down on me. How could I just move on? It wasn't just a business, it was part of me. And every day that passed, I became more and more determined to prove that I deserved my place. One evening, after a week of mulling over my options, I found myself standing in front of the company's headquarters. The glass doors reflected the city lights as they twinkled in the background, a sharp contrast to the darkness I felt inside. I knew I couldn't just waltz back in, that would be foolish. But I had to see it for myself, see how the business was running under Sean's leadership. I needed to understand how everything had changed and what he was doing differently. I pushed open the door, feeling a strange mix of dread and defiance. The familiar hum of the office felt colder now. There was a sense of urgency in the air, but not the same kind of urgency I had worked with. It wasn't the intense, goal-driven pace that had kept us up at night. This was something else. The employees seemed more distracted, their eyes glazed over as if they were working on autopilot. It wasn't just the atmosphere that had changed. It was the people, the energy. And Sean, he was nowhere to be found. I decided to visit the operations floor. My instincts had always been to keep a pulse on what was going on behind the scenes, on the ground level. I had built those relationships, had spent hours alongside the teams, making sure everything ran smoothly. As I walked past familiar faces, I noticed that the warmth in the office had disappeared. The friendly greetings I used to get from everyone were now absent. Instead, there was an awkward silence, like the air had thickened, and they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. I could feel the tension in the room. It was clear. Sean had no idea how to lead these people. And that's when I saw him. Sean was standing in front of one of the workstations, his back to me. He was laughing, in the middle of some offhand joke with a few of the employees, and for a moment it looked like everything was just fine. But as I watched, I realized that he wasn't talking about business. He wasn't discussing strategy or solving problems. He was just talking. It was all surface level, charm without substance. He wasn't doing anything to move the business forward. He was just passing the time, pretending to be a leader. My blood boiled. I had worked alongside these people, day in and day out, through the highs and lows. And here was Sean, taking the reins like he had any idea what it took to keep the business afloat. It wasn't just the company I was fighting for anymore. It was everything my father and I had built together. The sacrifices, the sweat, the hard-earned victories. It felt like they were being flushed away for the sake of a misguided, easy decision. I had never seen my father so blind. How could he let this happen? How could he let someone so ill-prepared take over? A few days later, I received a call. It was from one of the senior managers at the company, a man named Rajiv who had been with us since the beginning. His voice was low, almost like he was speaking from the shadows. "Elias," he said, "I don't know how to say this, but things aren't going well. Sean doesn't know what he's doing. The employees are starting to get frustrated. There's talk of quitting, of people leaving." I couldn't believe it. I hadn't even been back to the office for more than a few hours, and already cracks were showing in Sean's leadership. The very thing I had feared was beginning to unfold. I knew the pressure of the role would eventually get to him, but this was worse than I thought. It wasn't just about him failing. It was about the whole company failing. A collapse of everything we had worked for. Rajiv's voice wavered as he spoke again. I know you're upset, Elias, but we need you. Back. We need you here. Your father doesn't see it yet, but you're the one who can save this place. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down into an abyss. Part of me wanted to jump back in, to fight for the company with everything I had. But the other part of me was still haunted by the way my father had turned his back on me. Could I really do this? Could I work under Sean? Could I work with a man who had taken everything from me? The next few days were a blur. I spent hours weighing my options, trying to figure out if there was a way to fix this without betraying myself. I had to choose. Go back to the company, take a step back, and work with Sean, knowing that I would have to swallow my pride, or walk away, start over, and rebuild everything I had lost. But it wasn't just the business that was on the line anymore. It was family. It was everything I had built up with my father over the years. I had to decide whether I was going to let Sean destroy it all, or if I was going to rise to the occasion and fight for what was rightfully mine. But as I thought about the years of hard work, the late nights, the deals, the sweat, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't ready to give up yet. I reached out to Rajiv, telling him I was coming back. I couldn't just walk away. I wasn't done fighting for this. It was time to face my father, time to face Sean, and time to prove to everyone that I had what it took to lead this company, and that I would never let anyone take it from me without a fight. The conflict had only just begun. I walked into the boardroom, my heart pounding, every step I took feeling heavier than the last. The tension in the air was palpable. I could feel it, the undercurrent of unease that had been building up for weeks. Sean was sitting at the head of the table looking, like he had every right to be there, but I wasn't about to let him have it without a fight. This was my moment. I had come back, not just to prove myself, but to take back what was mine. My father was seated at the far end of the room, his face unreadable. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the way he looked between me and Sean, like he was caught between two worlds. The world of the business he had built, and the world he had chosen for his son. Elias, my father said, his voice calm but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. I'm glad you're here. We need to talk. I took my seat at the table, my gaze locking with Sean's. There was no warmth in his eyes. He didn't even bother to acknowledge me. It was like he had already decided this was his place, and I was just an inconvenience he'd have to deal with. Dad? Sean? I began, keeping my tone measured, but there was an edge to it. I didn't come back to make peace. I came back to take back what's mine. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything I had been through. My father's eyes flickered, but he didn't speak. It was Sean who responded, his voice laced with defensiveness. You don't get it, Elias. This is my time now. You had your chance, but you let it slip away. You weren't prepared for this. I am. I felt a surge of anger rise within me, but I kept it in check. You think you're prepared? You've been here a few weeks, and the company is already falling apart. You're out there joking with employees like this is some kind of game. People are leaving because they don't trust you, and you think you're ready to lead? My voice rose now, no longer willing to hold back the frustration that had been building for so long. You don't even understand the weight of what it takes to keep this business afloat. It's not about charm or jokes. It's about hard work. It's about sacrifice. It's about building something that lasts. Sean looked at me, his jaw clenched, but I could see the doubt creeping in. He knew I was right. The mask he had been wearing was starting to crack. The truth was, he wasn't ready, and he knew it. But he wasn't willing to admit it. You're not going to take this from me, Sean finally said, his voice rising in defiance. This is my company now. Dad said so. My father hadn't said much since the beginning of the meeting. but now his voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Enough," he said, his tone firm but tired. "I made my decision because I thought it was what was best for the company, but I see now that I was wrong." I turned to him, my heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean, Dad?" My father looked at me, his face a mixture of regret and something else. Something like shame. "I thought you were too focused on the details, Elias. I thought you were too rigid. But you were right. You were the one who truly understood this company. You were the one who built it. And I see that now." There was a long pause. A beat of silence that seemed to stretch on forever. And then, my father stood up, slowly, as if the weight of his decision was too much to bear. "I've been blind, son. I let my feelings get in the way of what was best for the business. I see now that you are the one who deserves to lead." The room was still, the air thick with the enormity of what had just been said. Sean's face had drained of color, the realization hitting him hard. He had been handed something he wasn't ready for, something he didn't truly understand. And now, I was reclaiming what had always been mine. "I want you to take the reins." "Elias," my father continued, "I've made my mistake and I can't undo it. But I can give you the company back. It's yours." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of responsibility. This was my chance, my opportunity to finally prove myself, not just to my father, but to everyone who had doubted me. I wasn't going to let this slip away again. I stood up, my voice steady but full of resolve. "I won't let you down, Dad. I won't let the company down." Sean stood up too, his face a mixture of frustration and something else I couldn't quite place. "You'll regret this," he muttered, his eyes burning with anger as he stormed out of the room. But I didn't regret it. This was what I had fought for. This was what I had earned. My father may have chosen the wrong path before, but now he was giving me the chance to prove myself. The company, my future, and the legacy of everything my father and I had built. It was all in my hands now, and this time, I wouldn't let it slip away. The days following that pivotal meeting felt like a whirlwind, a blur of decisions, calls, and meetings as I took control of the company once again. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about restoring trust, rebuilding the relationships that had been fractured, and most importantly, proving to myself that I was ready for this responsibility. But no one was more important in this process than my father. The first conversation we had after he handed me the reins was quiet, introspective. He came to my office late one evening, just as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting a soft, golden glow across the city. It was the kind of moment that made you feel like everything was possible again, that you could start fresh. "You're doing it, Elias," my father said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. He sat across from me, his eyes meeting mine, with a sincerity I hadn't seen in years. I should have seen it before, but I was blinded by my own pride. I didn't realize how much you truly cared about this company, about our legacy. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I always cared, Dad, but I couldn't do it without you. I didn't understand why you chose Sean, but I get it now. You thought he had the right qualities, the right personality. But it's not just about charm. It's about dedication. It's about putting in the hours, facing the tough decisions, and making sacrifices when no one else will." He sighed, looking out the window as if reflecting on everything that had led to this point. "I've made so many mistakes, Elias. Not just with the business, but with you. I should have seen what you were doing all along. You were always the one who understood the weight of this company, the importance of the people who worked here. I let my emotions cloud my judgment. I chose Sean because I wanted him to be what he wasn't. But you are exactly what this Company needs. I looked at my father, the man who had been my mentor, my guide, and in many ways, my idol. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were on the same page. There was no more tension between us, no more feeling of betrayal. We had faced the darkest moments of our relationship, and now we were on the other side of it. We had found a way to heal, to move forward together. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to regain the trust of our employees and stakeholders. I had my work cut out for me. The damage Sean had caused wasn't something that could be undone overnight. People were hesitant, unsure if the company could recover from the missteps he had made. But I was determined to show them that I could lead, that I could be the kind of leader they could believe in. One of the first things I did was reach out to Rajiv, the senior manager who had called me when things were falling apart. His loyalty had been unwavering, and I knew he had the pulse of the company. We sat down together and talked about the future. We outlined a new strategy, focusing on rebuilding morale, realigning our core values, and reestablishing the relationships that had been strained. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the people. Slowly but surely, the company began to turn around. The employees who had been on the verge of leaving started to return. The vendors who had been skeptical began to trust us again, and the clients who had pulled back started to see that we were back on track. I worked closely with every department, getting my hands dirty, reminding everyone of the reasons we had built this company in the first place: hard work, integrity, and a commitment to excellence. Sean, on the other hand, didn't fare as well. He tried to fight back, tried to create friction, but it was clear that his heart wasn't in it. He lacked the drive, the deep-rooted passion that this company required. In the end, he left. It wasn't dramatic, no grand confrontation. He just walked away. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I had always known that without the right foundation, he would never have been able to lead. But even though Sean's departure marked the end of an era, it also marked a new beginning. The company was mine again. It wasn't just the business that I had taken back. It was the respect, the trust, and the legacy that my father and I had built together. One evening, as I walked through the office after hours, I found myself standing in front of the same desk where I had spent countless nights before. The office, now humming with a new energy, felt like home again. I smiled to myself, thinking about how far we had come. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was enough. But I had done it. I had fought for what was right, for what I deserved, and I had won. As I sat down at my desk, my father came in. He stood there for a moment, watching me, before finally speaking. "You did it, son," he said quietly. "You showed me what I had been blind to for so long. This is your company now. You've earned it." And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just about the company. It was about the journey, the struggle, the growth, and the understanding that came with it. I wasn't just leading a business now. I was leading a legacy, and no one could take that away from me. As the sun set behind the skyline, casting a golden hue over the city, I sat at my desk, the weight of everything I had fought for settling on my shoulders. It had been a long road, full of pain, betrayal, and doubt, but it had brought me here, to this moment, to this new beginning. The company was thriving again, stronger than it had ever been. The employees who had stayed were now reinvigorated. The ones who had left were starting to return, and the world could see the shift in our energy. My father and I had rebuilt our relationship, not just as business partners, but as father and son. There were no more barriers between us, only understanding, respect, and the bond we had nearly lost. I had walked through fire, and now I stood on the other side. The journey wasn't just about reclaiming the business. It was about reclaiming my place in the world, proving to myself that I could weather any storm and come out stronger. The company was mine now, but more importantly, I was my own. As I looked out the window, I couldn't help but smile. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The challenges would continue, and there would be more obstacles ahead, but now I was ready. Ready to lead, ready to fight, and ready to build something that would stand the test of time. And no matter what came next, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going anywhere. The legacy was mine to carry forward.